Welcome to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. What you're about to hear might sound like fiction, but for someone out there, it's the truth they never got to tell. My name is Rachel Hayes. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how I paid over $12,000 for a wedding, only to be thrown out of it like I never mattered. But they didn't know I held the strings to everything. And when I pulled them, it all unraveled. It started on a quiet Thursday morning. I was making coffee in my tiny kitchen, the soft gurgle of the machine the only sound breaking the silence. Sunlight spilled lazily across the countertops, and for a brief second, I almost forgot how fractured everything had become between me and my family. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced over, expecting a notification about the wedding plans I'd been helping with, something about the florist or cake delivery. Instead, I read a message that punched the breath from my lungs. You are not invited to the wedding. Mason's family doesn't want you there. No punctuation. No warmth. Just cold dismissal. From my mother. I stared at it, unblinking, while the coffee finished brewing behind me. The woman who once kissed my scraped knees and taught me how to braid my hair had sent that message. My own mother, Evelyn Hayes. The same woman whose dream wedding for her youngest daughter I had been funding, quietly, invisibly, without expectation. Until now. I slowly sat my cup down on the counter. My hands didn't shake, not yet. I just sat there, stunned. And then I did what I always do. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and logged into the wedding reservation account. The name at the top of the invoice glowed on the screen like a final betrayal, Rachel Hayes. Not Olivia. Not Mason. Me. I had put down the deposit. I had paid the bills. I had planned the entire thing while Olivia, the perfect, sparkling younger sister, played dress-up with Mason's rich family and posted TikToks of her bride journey. The saddest part? They didn't even know I had been footing the bill for months. Or worse, maybe they did, and they just didn't care. The venue deposit alone was $4,500. When I hovered over the cancel button, a red warning flashed on the screen, non-refundable. Didn't matter. I clicked. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Like I'd stopped holding my breath after being underwater far too long. No rage. No tears. Just this strange, eerie quiet. As if I'd finally stepped out of a house that was burning, and only now smelled the smoke clinging to my clothes. Growing up, Olivia was always the golden child. Sweet. Graceful. Always saying the right thing. And me? I was the one who asked too many questions. I was the daughter who noticed when money disappeared from shared accounts without explanation. The one who dared to ask Mom, where did the $2,800 catering deposit go, while she waved it off with a tired, just trust me. Apparently, wearing black to brunch and questioning a financial discrepancy made me bad energy. Mason said so once, loud enough for me to hear. And Mom didn't even flinch. Olivia didn't defend me either. They just moved on, like I was a mood killer rather than their family. But they always came back to me when they needed things. When Olivia needed help fixing the wedding invitations, when Mason wanted help finding a penthouse, when Mom forgot her credit card at the flower shop, suddenly, Rachel mattered again. The walking wallet. The quiet fixer. That's who I was to them. I used to tell myself it was just how families were. That they were stressed. That I was just the capable one, so naturally they leaned on me more. But when they sent that message, blunt and final, it was like someone had finally spoken the quiet part out loud. They didn't see me as family. I was a tool. A service. An accessory. The day of Olivia's wedding was fast approaching, and I realized something else. I held the keys to the entire operation. Every digital asset, every reservation, every contract and file, it all ran through accounts under my name. Because it was easier that way. Because I was so good with money. Because nobody ever thought I'd say no. But I was done. And they had no idea what was coming. I didn't cry that day. Not when I canceled the venue. Not when I disabled access to the Google Drive folder filled with every contract and invoice I'd compiled over 6 sleepless months. Not even when I removed my Canva account permissions, where the wedding invitations Olivia proudly posted were actually built, pixel by pixel, by me. No, I didn't cry. But I remembered. I remembered everything. The time Olivia's engagement party happened without me. The one I only found out about through a mutual friend's Instagram story. My mother had been there, front and center, champagne glass in hand, beaming like she was being given a Nobel Peace Prize. I had asked Mom afterward why I wasn't invited. She laughed it off. Everyone assumed you were busy, Rachel. Besides, it was mainly for Mason's family. You know, the Main family. That phrase had haunted me. The Main family. And I was what? The appendix? A glitch in their otherwise curated image? I guess I should have seen it coming. But part of you always hopes that if you just give a little more, help one more time, pay one more bill, they'll see you. Really see you. They didn't. Later that night, I was going over my notes for a corporate tax client when another message popped up. This time, it wasn't from Mom. It was a group notification, Olivia's dream wedding crew. I hadn't realized I was still on the back end of the shared folder from when I set up the planning structure. I clicked it without thinking, and the messages opened. I wish I hadn't looked. But at the same time, I'm glad I did. Does Arya even know what you've been saying about her? One girl had written. Who cares? Olivia replied. She never reacts. Knowing how to stay quiet is basically her family role. Another chimed in, honestly, she fits the support role better than being a guest. Always feels off-key. I read those lines over and over, my chest hollowing out with each passing second. Support role. Off-key. Never reacts. It was like they'd written my eulogy while I was still alive, and in the middle of paying for the casket. That night, something inside me snapped. But not in a loud, explosive way. It was the quiet kind of break. The irreversible kind. Like a bridge collapsing in slow motion while everyone on it keeps walking forward, oblivious. I didn't even finish my work. I just closed the laptop and sat there, staring into the darkness of my apartment. They'd taken my silence for consent. My help for helplessness. My money for meaninglessness. And worst of all, they thought I'd never say anything. That I'd keep absorbing their cruelty like a sponge soaking up spilt wine, quietly, without protest, until I was wrung dry. But this time, they were wrong. The next morning, I sat at my desk and methodically dismantled their fantasy piece by piece. The files? Gone. I revoked every shared permission and deleted backup copies. The slideshow Olivia had asked me to put together, with childhood photos and sappy captions? Wiped clean. Then I opened the restaurant reservation system. Their fancy rehearsal dinner at Sapphire Ridge Country Club? I had booked it. Under my name. I didn't delete the booking. I just changed the status. Cancelled by account owner. When they found out, it would be too late. The venue would be unavailable, the guest list gone, the vendors unreachable. The illusion would shatter. And I would be far away from the explosion. But fate, apparently, wasn't done with me. Just as I was closing my laptop, a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My landlord usually called first. The mail carrier never knocked. I opened the door slowly, and there it was. A small, pale yellow envelope on the floor. No name on the front except 3 shaky words scrawled in blue pen. For Rachel. I picked it up, heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. Inside, there was a short note on top of a stack of papers and a silver USB stick. The note read, You don't deserve this. Here's what they've been hiding. K. My breath caught in my throat. Kayla Summers. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She was a junior accountant at my old firm, the one who got thrown under the bus during an internal scandal I helped quietly resolve. She was nervous and awkward but grateful. We weren't friends, but I had her back when no one else did. Apparently, she remembered. I plugged in the USB. What I saw made my hands shake for the first time. Audio recordings. Transcripts. Chat screenshots. The first file was an MP3. I hesitated, then hit play. Mason's voice. Rachel transferred money again. She's so easy to manipulate. Olivia's laugh. She still thinks she's being a good big sister. We'll use her as long as we can. Then another message, this one from Olivia to her group chat. Who cares if Rachel finds out? She never reacts anyway. It's like she was born to be the background character. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat back. Breathing. Processing. Absorbing the full extent of their betrayal. And then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Final Cut. Into it went every audio clip. Every screenshot. Every bank transfer statement Kayla had compiled that linked me to over $12,400 in wedding costs. Because this time, I wouldn't just step back. This time, I'd step up and let the truth speak for itself. It's strange how calm you can feel when everything finally clicks into place, not because something miraculous happened, but because the lies are no longer a mystery. They're just facts. Documented. Labeled. Ready to be used. I sat at my desk, the pale morning light pooling over the edges of my laptop as I sorted each piece of evidence into folders like a surgeon preparing for a quiet, deliberate operation. There would be no screaming matches. No public Facebook rants. I didn't want drama. I wanted precision. That was when I made the call. Kristen? I said, when the line picked up. I need a favor. A big one. Kristen was an old friend from my audit days, a data verification specialist now running her own forensics firm. She was the kind of woman who could tell if an audio file had been edited based on the sound profile of a single breath. She didn't hesitate. Do you want full verification or just enough to protect yourself? Everything, I replied. And I want it public. 2 hours later, I had the full report in my inbox. Every single file on Kala's USB stick was authenticated, unedited, with metadata that traced each one back to Olivia and Mason's devices. Kristen even included a notarized summary of findings in case I needed to defend myself legally. I closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and stood. I wasn't scared. I wasn't second-guessing. I was done being the quiet one. The plan was simple. Olivia and Mason were hosting the rehearsal dinner that evening at Sapphire Ridge Country Club, the same reservation I had canceled. But knowing Olivia, she would have thrown money at the problem and booked something else at the last minute. Her pride wouldn't allow her to admit anything had gone wrong. She'd smile through the fire. Perfect. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to humiliate them with screaming and insults. I just wanted the truth to sit in the room with them, echoing off every polished chandelier and crystal glass until there was no more space left to pretend. So, I dressed carefully. Clean black dress. Modest heels. No jewelry except for the slim gold chain I hadn't taken off since college. I looked like someone you wouldn't notice until I spoke. When I walked into the banquet hall, Olivia was already on stage with Mason, her hand draped delicately around his elbow, like she was born to be admired. My mother was at the head table, her expression a flawless mask of satisfaction. And then the whispers started. A few heads turned. 1 or 2 jaws dropped. I was not supposed to be there. I watched the tension ripple through the room like a stone dropped into still water. Mason's back stiffened. Olivia's lips froze mid-smile. My mother's eyes narrowed with the slow dawning of dread. I didn't rush. I walked slowly to the podium, each step deliberate. When I reached the mic, I gently tapped a glass with a spoon, just 3 times. Clink. 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 The hall fell silent. "Sorry to interrupt," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Before the party continues, I think everyone should hear a few very honest things." I placed a small Bluetooth speaker on the podium and calmly inserted the silver USB. Olivia took 1 step forward. "Rachel, what are you?" I held up a hand. "Not done yet." Then I pressed play. Mason's voice came through the speaker first, clear and cold. "Rachel transferred money again. She's so easy to manipulate." There was a collective gasp. A fork dropped somewhere in the back. Olivia's painted-on smile collapsed. The next clip followed immediately. Olivia's laugh. "She still thinks she's being the good big sister. We'll use her as long as we can." My eyes swept across the room. Some guests stared at Olivia. Others looked down, ashamed, as if realizing they had played along with the act for far too long. Then the third clip. "Who cares? She never reacts anyway. Knowing how to stay quiet is basically her role in the family." I paused the recording. My mother stood up, her voice sharp. "Rachel, stop this right now. You're humiliating all of us." I turned to her, meeting her gaze calmly. "No, Mom. I'm reminding everyone who started the humiliation." That was when Kristen stepped into the room. She walked straight to the podium, the ID badge from her firm gleaming under the lights. "Good evening," she said. "I'm Kristen Miller, Data Verification Specialist. All recordings presented are original, unedited, and verified. Metadata confirms they were sourced from Olivia and Mason's personal devices." There was no shouting. No chaos. Just silence. And then, I pulled out the folder. Neatly clipped. Chronologically organized. Every payment, every transaction, every single dollar I had spent. "I'm not here to ask for money," I said, voice unwavering. "I just want everyone to understand the truth. That this wedding, the flowers, the invitations, the venue you were supposed to enjoy tonight, was built on manipulation and exploitation." I handed the folder to Mason. "You're the groom. You deserve to know exactly who you're marrying." He didn't open it at first. He just stared at Olivia. His eyes were no longer confused. No longer soft. They were cold. Calculating. "You told me she always caused trouble," he said slowly. "That she lied. That she was jealous." Olivia looked like a ghost in a bridal gown. "Mason, I didn't mean." But it was too late. Mason tightened his grip on the folder. A few papers slipped out, fluttering to the floor. "I can't marry someone who treats her own sister like a bank account and calls it love," he said quietly. This isn't who I want to build a future with." My mother gasped. Olivia staggered back. And the room erupted, not into chaos, but into judgment. Guests whispered. Some left. Others stared. And I walked out without looking back. I didn't rush out of the banquet hall. I walked. Slowly. Gracefully. Not for drama, but because I finally understood what power felt like, not control over others, but control over myself. Outside, the night was crisp. The clouds hung low, smeared across the sky like smudged chalk. I paused at the edge of the parking lot and looked up. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Not because I had destroyed anything, but because I had finally stopped letting them destroy me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. It was just a misunderstanding, sweetheart. Please don't ruin your sister's moment. I didn't respond. There was no need. They'd had my silence for years. It was time they learned what it meant to live without it. I left the city the next morning. I didn't pack much. Just what fit in a modest suitcase, some clothes, my laptop, and a few books I'd always meant to read but never had the peace of mind to open. The destination? A small town called Maple Hollow. It sat quietly on the edge of nowhere, so obscure that Google Maps lagged when I searched for it. Just the way I liked it. The rental cabin I found was old, weathered, and perfect. Crimson maple trees lined the gravel path, and the lake behind the house reflected the sky so clearly it made you second-guess what was real. The floorboards creaked. The windows let in the cold. But every flaw made it feel like mine. No voices calling me from the other room. No sudden texts asking for favors. No guilt. Just silence. Blessed, beautiful silence. In Maple Hollow, nobody cared who I used to be. At the corner cafe, Mrs. Helen served me the same cappuccino every morning without asking questions. At the Community Cultural Center, I signed up for a course in historical image preservation, an odd passion of mine, now finally given room to grow. I started volunteering at the town's modest museum. My job was simple: restore and archive old photographs and letters. Work that most people would find tedious. But I loved it. Because every fragile document I touched reminded me that things could survive, even when neglected, faded, nearly forgotten. Maybe I wasn't just restoring history. Maybe I was restoring myself. A few weeks passed. One afternoon, I was deep in a box of faded Civil War photos when my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. Olivia will be hosting a party to restore her image after the incident. Mom thinks you should come so people can see the family is still strong. I read it once. Then again. Then placed the phone face down and kept working. There was no fire in my chest. No need to scream or cry. Just the quiet realization that they hadn't changed at all. Even after everything. Still spinning a narrative. Still pretending. Still assuming I'd play along. I didn't block the number. I didn't reply. I simply let the message float into the background noise of a life I no longer had to respond to. That alone was power enough. The Hayes family had always thrived on control, emotional manipulation dressed up as obligation. And for years, I let them direct my life like a stage play where I was never meant to take center. Now, the curtain had closed. And I'd walked out the back door before anyone realized I was gone. One morning, while labeling photos at the museum, I received a formal-looking email. Not from family. From a legal firm. It wasn't addressed to me directly, it was a property fraud alert involving Alan Hayes, my father. Apparently, he had tried to mortgage family land. A property he assumed was still under his name. It wasn't. Years ago, when I saw his financial recklessness growing worse, early retirement, maxed credit cards, hush-hush investments, I'd taken legal steps to secure the deed under my name. I had protected it with restrictive clauses and alert triggers, just in case. Now those clauses had kicked in. The contract he tried to file had been auto-flagged as fraudulent. The report was already under review by the Property Audit Board. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. The storm he now faced was one he built with his own hands. And the only reason it hit was because the silent architect, me, had finally stopped holding the beams in place. That's the thing about being the person everyone leans on. They forget what happens when you walk away. The whole house shakes. News traveled fast, even in Maple Hollow. I overheard whispers at the cafe, small-town folks casually discussing a family scandal unraveling back in the city. I never mentioned that the name Hayes used to be mine. I didn't need to. Let the story travel on its own. I had nothing left to defend. Mason, according to an article someone posted online, was suspended from his finance firm pending internal review. Apparently, a whistleblower had leaked details about questionable transactions, many of which traced back to the wedding budget I'd once silently managed. Funds misused. Claims falsified. His bosses called it reckless misrepresentation. I called it karma. Olivia, meanwhile, tried to salvage her influencer deals with a live stream, claiming she was betrayed by someone close. But viewers weren't buying it. The comment section turned savage. Is this the sister who paid for your wedding? Where's that USB again? She ended the stream early. A few days later, one of her sponsors dropped her. Then another. Without me silently cleaning up behind her, Olivia's cracks were showing. And no amount of soft filters or apologetic captions could hide the truth anymore. They were unraveling. Not because I had attacked them, but because I had finally stopped saving them. That was the real blow. And it was only just beginning. I never imagined peace would feel like this, not triumphant, not exhilarating. Just quiet. It settled around me like snowfall in Maple Hollow, soft and unobtrusive, blanketing the mess I'd left behind in the city. Each morning, I opened my eyes without dreading my notifications. My calendar no longer contained anyone else's emergencies. No more invoices to chase. No more invitations to fix. No more guilt trips veiled as affection. Just me. A library restoration project. A stack of fragile photos waiting for careful hands. And a town that never asked for anything except maybe a weather update or a neighborly smile. But the quiet didn't mean I stopped watching. The downfall of the Hayes family wasn't explosive. It was slow, almost methodical, like watching an overinflated balloon deflate through a pinhole. One news article at a time. One canceled deal after another. One awkward silence in once packed social gatherings. Without me smoothing over their chaos, they were exposed. Mason lost his position at the firm. Apparently, someone had pulled the receipts from his wedding dealings and found that several invoices were filed as personal development expenses in his department's internal budget. The board didn't like that. He claimed ignorance. His assistant told another story. I didn't follow the whole scandal obsessively, I only checked updates once a week, out of habit. Not hope. I wasn't waiting for justice. It had already happened the moment I walked away and refused to play their game anymore. Olivia tried harder than anyone to salvage her image. I almost admired her determination, until I remembered how easily she laughed when Mason called me easy to manipulate. She started doing charity appearances, over-edited reels with captions like, "Sometimes the strongest families go through the hardest storms. Broken heart sparkles." But the algorithm didn't forgive easily. People remembered the audio. They remembered her laugh. Every time she tried to post something inspirational, someone dropped a quote from the USB drive in the comments like a bomb. She still thinks she's being the good big sister. We'll use her as long as we can. Her social media became a graveyard of broken captions and hidden replies. She started disabling comments. That's when you know you've lost control of the narrative. And this time, I wasn't there to rewrite it for her. She sent an email once. A long one. For full paragraphs about how hurt she was. How misunderstood. How we could fix this together. I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. I just moved it to a folder titled "No Response Required." The same one where I stored Mom's attempts to reach me. Guilt-sweetened voicemails. Voicemails that always began with "Rachel, you know I love you," and ended with, "But Olivia's going through a lot." I stopped listening after the first line. It was the same old chorus, sung over a different melody. The tune of manipulation never really changes, it just shifts key. One gray December afternoon, I was organizing 1940s census records when Mrs. Helen from the cafe walked into the museum holding a small envelope. No return address, she said, handing it to me gently. But they left it with me after your morning stop. I recognized the envelope's feel before I even looked at the handwriting. Thick. Premium paper. The kind used for wedding invitations. Inside, folded neatly, was a faded photo. The Hayes family, standing together in a pose so rehearsed it barely looked human. Olivia in the center. Mason on one side. My mother clutching a bouquet. My father stiffly beside her. Everyone grinning with perfect teeth. I wasn't in it. Of course I wasn't. They'd finally made the picture they always wanted, without the inconvenient daughter standing off-key at the edge. No note. No apology. Just the photo. It wasn't a message of peace. It was bait. A plea disguised as subtle cruelty. See, it whispered. We're fine without you. Are you fine without us? I folded the photo carefully. I didn't rip it. I didn't burn it. That would have made it a symbol, and I wasn't giving it that kind of power. Instead, I walked it to the recycling tray behind the museum and let it drop. That was all the closure I needed. Not a shout. Not a confrontation. Just a quiet refusal to let them take up space in my life anymore. Later that week, I stopped by the wood-carving shop down the road. Mr. Calvin was finishing up a new sign for the town's winter library fundraiser. He smiled when he saw me. You still want that mailbox sign for the cabin? I nodded. Name or no name, he asked. I thought for a moment, then handed him a slip of paper. One sentence, handwritten in blue ink. This mailbox does not accept expectations from others. He chuckled. That's a first. But he didn't question it. A few days later, he mounted the small wooden plaque next to my dark brown mailbox. It stood out against the snow like a quiet manifesto. I ran my fingers over the carved letters that afternoon, the wind catching in my scarf. I didn't need a nameplate anymore. I knew who I was. And more importantly, I knew who I no longer had to be. Winter settled over Maple Hollow like a thick, woolen blanket, quiet and heavy, with just enough bite to keep people inside and introspective. I found myself rising with the sun, brewing tea instead of coffee, sitting on the porch wrapped in my grandmother's old quilt, just breathing. Some mornings, I'd catch sight of my reflection in the frost-kissed glass of the museum's archive cabinet. And each time, I saw someone I barely recognized, calmer, steadier, untouched by the panic and pain that used to chase me like a second shadow. I had become someone else. Not because of revenge. But because I had finally stopped being someone's doormat. Still, letting go wasn't about erasing everything. It was about finally recognizing what I deserved. Which is why, one cold morning in January, I finally closed the last door. I walked into the downtown branch of my old bank, the same one where my name was still linked to the Hayes emergency savings account. The same account that had been borrowed from more times than I could count. I asked the teller to shut it down. No, I said firmly, when she asked if I wanted to notify the other linked users. Just close it. She clicked through the screens. Would you like to keep the debit card? I took it from my wallet, snapped it clean in half, and dropped the pieces into the bank's recycling bin. My hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't shake. That moment, watching the broken card fall into the bin, felt lighter than anything I'd experienced in years. It was like cutting the last puppet string still wrapped around my spine. Next came my phone number. Blocking family hadn't worked. They always found ways around it, new numbers, burner accounts, mutual friends playing messenger. So I did something better. I canceled the number altogether. New service. New SIM. New contract under a name no one in my past would recognize. With a tap and a swipe, I vanished from their world. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. Choosing to be unreachable. choosing to never again be the emergency contact for people who never showed up for mine. That evening, I did one final sweep through my digital life. Every shared account Olivia had access to, deleted. The Canva login she used to edit the wedding invitations? Gone. The guest list she begged me to revise 3 nights in a row while Mason was too tired? Gone. The slideshow folder with childhood photos she took credit for compiling? Gone. I didn't just remove her access, I erased the archives themselves. Not out of spite. But because those files weren't memories anymore. They were liabilities. Proof of my willingness to be used. Proof that I had built a kingdom for people who never saw me as queen, or even citizen. And now, I had burned the blueprints. Let them live in the ruins. Back in the city, the fallout had worsened. I knew only what trickled through articles and social media threads. Mason had quietly stepped away from his firm. Not a firing, but everyone knew what that meant. One former coworker leaked a screenshot from the company Slack. Turns out his fiancée's sister funded the whole wedding he bragged about in Q3 meetings. Can't fake a PowerPoint when the receipts are on Reddit. Olivia, meanwhile, tried launching a new podcast, redefining realness, from family drama to fierce womanhood. But even the teaser got ratioed. Every reply was a reminder of the audio files, the laughter, the manipulation. Sponsors didn't call. Followers didn't engage. And without me running damage control from the background, she was just another influencer trying to whitewash her own cruelty. The one thing about digital footprints, once people know what to look for, they find everything. Even the lies you forgot you told. Then came the story about my father. His property fraud case had gone public. Not because I filed anything, but because he kept digging deeper after the first rejection. And when you dig hard enough, eventually the earth cracks under you. Someone from his old golf club leaked the news to a finance blog. It made the rounds on Twitter. A few of their social circle tried to defend him, until the court documents were uploaded online. I read through them once, in silence. Then I closed the tab and went back to work, scanning a photograph of a small boy from 1927, smiling shyly with one foot raised like he was about to run. That boy, frozen in time, mattered more to me than any headline my family was making. Because I wasn't part of that story anymore. I had stopped being a headline in their saga of dysfunction. I had become a footnote, and gladly so. In late January, I received a letter at the cabin. Not from family. From the Maple Hollow Historical Society. It was an official offer, to become the full-time curator for their regional archive program. Not just a volunteer position. A job. A life. A role that had nothing to do with anyone's expectations but mine. I accepted before the ink on the letter dried. Not because it was prestigious. It wasn't. Not because it paid well. It didn't. But because it was mine. My work. My time. My name on the door. Mrs. Helen brought a small bouquet to the museum on my first official day. "You've got the calm of someone who finally chose peace," she said softly, hugging me with gentle arms that smelled like lavender and coffee. And that was the first time in months I almost cried. Not because of pain. But because someone finally saw me not for what I could give. But for who I was. The final gift Maple Hollow gave me wasn't escape. It was clarity. And for that, I would always be grateful. I used to believe that healing came like a wave, that one day, the pain would rush out of you all at once, and you'd be clean again. But here in Maple Hollow, I learned the truth. Healing doesn't come in waves. It comes in whispers. In slow mornings where you don't dread your own thoughts. In quiet walks along the lake when no one's watching. In moments when your phone stays silent for hours, and you no longer feel abandoned, you feel free. February crept in, blanketing the town in stillness. I spent most of my days at the archives, brushing dust from old newspaper clippings, carefully pressing delicate photographs between sheets of acid-free paper. Every item had a story. Some tragic. Some inspiring. All of them mattered, even if no one remembered the names anymore. Maybe that's why I loved it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was simply valued. Then one day, something strange happened. While organizing civil rights-era documents in the back room, I received an envelope. No return address. Just my name on the front, Rachel, in tight, deliberate cursive. Inside was a photograph. Not old this time. Recent. The Hayes family, posing in front of a new banner for Olivia's healing retreat. A poorly staged PR stunt. Smiles too forced. Arms stiff. But what caught my eye wasn't their expressions, it was what was missing. Me. Again. Only this time, I didn't feel replaced. I didn't feel erased. I felt nothing. They weren't taunting me. They were reaching. This was their way of saying, see? We're okay. Please, notice us. But I didn't care if they were okay. Because I finally was. I placed the photo on the museum's paper shredder and watched it disappear into strips of irrelevance. There was no bitterness. No rage. Just a deep understanding that some chapters don't need to be ripped out, they just need to be left behind. That weekend, Mr. Calvin came by with the finished sign for my mailbox. I watched as he mounted it carefully, brushing away snow from the post. 5 simple words, carved in bold, deliberate strokes. No expectations will be accepted. We stood in silence for a moment, admiring it. Calvin tilted his head. You sure about that? I smiled. It's not a warning. It's a promise. He nodded and walked away, leaving me standing there, bundled in my coat, staring at the most honest declaration I'd ever made. Because that was the truth. I no longer accepted roles I didn't choose. I no longer owed apologies for drawing boundaries. I no longer lived my life for the comfort of those who only called me family when they needed something. Later that night, I curled up in front of the fireplace with a book, a blanket, and nothing tugging at my soul. My tea had gone cold. The snow outside thickened, layering the world in silence. A silence I had earned. And then I thought about everything that had happened, the wedding I funded, the betrayal I uncovered, the moment I pressed play on a speaker and let the truth finally speak for itself. I thought about Olivia's voice, manipulative, confident, mocking. I thought about Mason's silence once he realized who he was marrying. I thought about my mother's stunned face as her version of the family crumbled in front of polite strangers and half-sipped wine. They had expected me to break down. To rage. To beg. They had built their entire lives assuming I'd never leave the role they assigned me. They thought their power over me was permanent. But the real twist? I was the one holding the entire machine together. Not with tantrums. Not with threats. With quiet, consistent labor. With love that expected nothing and received even less. And when I finally stepped away, not with drama, not with vengeance, just silence, they didn't know how to function. They collapsed under the weight of their own entitlement. And I started over. Not by proving them wrong. But by finally proving myself right. The final lesson? Revenge doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is walking away, reclaiming your peace, and living well without them. Let them search for you in their chaos. Let them rebuild what they shattered with the same empty hands that once took from yours. They can tell their stories. They can play the victims. They can Photoshop the family portraits all they want. But they will never again edit you into a frame you no longer belong in. Because you left. And you didn't just survive. You became untouchable. Sometimes, the real victory isn't winning the fight, it's choosing not to attend the war they invited you to. If Rachel's story resonated with you, Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever walked away from a toxic family? Did silence become your greatest power? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.